Hi everyone, in this video we look at chapter 10 Trigo functions. How do we sketch Trigo graphs? So very quickly we'll look at the three main shapes that you need to know for this chapter. Your sine graph, cosine graph and tangent graph. So very quickly as a recap, as you recall, your sine graph, whenever we say sine graph, you must remember that the shape of your sine graph is always a sinusoidal curve like this. Okay, this is the graph of positive y equals to sine x. And this is basically your x-axis, but we always remember this by the shape, which is this very important shape that you must know from here. Okay, let me color this black so that it's the axis. Yeah. Okay, so likewise, let's say right, if I have a negative sine graph instead, okay, you must also remember in the case whereby now instead of a positive sine graph, the shape for a negative sine graph is simply just a reflection about your x-axis, meaning that whatever that is on top will reflect downwards, whatever that is below will reflect upwards. So therefore, for your graph of y equals to negative sine x, your shape of your graph will look like this. Okay, so this shape is very important for you to identify how does your graph look like. You must first be able to tell what does the shape of your graph look like. Okay, so this is for your sine graph. Okay, so no minimum maximum value based on this is just 1 and a negative 1. Amplitude is 1. Okay, similarly for y equals to cosine x. Y equals to cosine x, you must always remember the important shape you must know that it starts from the maximum, goes to the minimum, and then goes back up to maximum again. This is one cycle. And if it is your y equals to negative cosine x graph, it will be likewise, but I will reflect about your x-axis, meaning that your shape will start from the minimum instead, go all the way up to the maximum, and then go back down to the minimum. Okay, this is one cycle. And lastly, your tangent graph. So maybe to make it clear, I can just draw the axis so you can visualize better. Okay, this is how your graph should look like. Y, X, Y, X. So usually it will start from the X, from the part whereby X is equal to 0 when you set your graph. This is one cycle. And lastly, for your Y equals to tangent X graph. Y equals to tangent X graph. When I sketch a graph, right, you must be able to identify that the shape of your graph for your positive tangent X graph always start from 0, goes upwards like this, and then there is an asymptote down. Okay, let me draw this y-axis. Okay, and my x-axis here. Okay, so this is the basic shape of your tangent graph. It always starts from the 0, goes all the way up to infinity, and then it doesn't touch the asymptote. Then after that, it will start all the way back down from negative infinity back to this point here. And this is one cycle, and the cycle repeat for tangent x graph. And likewise, if it is a tangent, y equals to negative tangent x graph, you must remember the shape as well. If I were to draw the axis again, okay, remember whenever I see a negative, it just means a reflection of the graph about the x-axis. So that means the graph will look something like this instead. Okay, it will now go from 0 towards the negative infinity part. It will not touch the asymptote, and then it will start from infinity downwards all the way to 0 again. This is all one cycle. Okay, so once you know this basic shape, this will help you identify how to sketch graphs from here. Let's now move on. Now I look at the general form of Trigo functions. We know that we have three Trigo functions: sine, cosine, and tangent. All of them can be written in this general form. Y equals to a sine, cosine, or tangent bx plus c. What does a mean in terms of your sine and cosine function first? A represents your amplitude. Remember, amplitude is the positive value of a. So that means if let's say this number here is negative 3, the amplitude is just 3. I'm only taking the positive value. Okay, the negative means that your graph is reflected about your x-axis. How to calculate period of sine and cosine function is basically 360 degrees or 2 pi divided by b. B is the number multiplied to bx. So for example, if the number here is 2x, for example, sine 2x, here the b is equal to 2. Another tricky thing, if it is sine x over 2, the b here is not 2, the b here is half, because this is half multiplied by x. Okay, so make sure this is when questions will get tricky. Make sure you know how to identify b clearly. Okay, oops. Okay, so other than that, you also need to know for sine and cosine graph, there is always a maximum and minimum y value. How is this calculated is using your amplitude. Maximum y value is simply your amplitude. Okay, amplitude here plus c. Minimum y value is the negative of the amplitude minus c. Okay, and the axis, meaning that the part of the graph which is translated vertically upwards is y equals to c, which is represented by this number added to your sine or cosine function. So this axis here, very important. It is where you should know where to start your graph from. Okay, and then we go on to tangent. Tangent a tangent bx plus c. The negative just means that the graph is reflected about the x-axis. Take note, for tangent graph, there is no maximum or minimum because the graph goes all the way to infinity and negative infinity. So therefore, there is no amplitude. Okay, how do I calculate period? It is simply 180 degrees divided by b, or pi divided by b. And for the asymptotes, it is 90 degrees divided by b, 270 degrees divided by b. I just need to add, in this case here, add one cycle, which is 180 degrees, to find out all the asymptotes. Okay, so there are many different asymptotes. You need to keep calculating them if needed based on the range the question wants you to sketch. Okay, and same thing for axis. It is the part of the graph which is shifted vertically from the x-axis. Alright, so now let's look at some simple examples of how to draw a graph. I'll look at one example here. Okay, I have already done this part here to help you visualize. If the question here says sketch the graph of y equals to this for the range of x between 0 and 180 degrees, all you need to do is that, I always remember this by a short form, we call this SPAM. S-P-A-M. What does SPAM stand for? S stands for shape. First, given your Trigo function, identify what is the shape. This is a negative sign function. Negative sign means it is this shape like this. Okay, if it's a positive sign and it's this shape, negative sign will be this shape. Secondly, P stands for period. Okay, period for sine is 360 degrees divided by B. B in this case here is 2, which means I get 180 degrees, and therefore this means for this range here, I need to draw just one cycle of this shape. Okay, next part, axis. Axis just means the number added or subtracted to your Trigo function. In this case here, there's 1. So the axis is y equals to 1. Okay, and last part, maximum and minimum y value is based on your amplitude. In this case over here, my amplitude here is 3. So therefore, from my axis here, I just need to add 3 to the axis to get my maximum value, minus 3 to the axis value to get my minimum value here. Okay, so over here, if I write this in short form so you can remember better, S stands for shape, P stands for period, A stands for axis, and M stands for maximum or minimum. Okay, so remember this, always write this at the side so that it helps you know and better plan how to sketch your graph. Okay, so once I get this from here, I can now sketch my graph. So let's say I use my ruler. Okay, I will now draw my x-axis here. Okay, this is my y-axis. Then after that, I draw my x-axis. Okay, to make it easier, actually, what is easier is that we first start by drawing your axis of the graph. Okay, so over here, I know that y equals to 1 is the axis of the graph. So on my graph here, I will draw a dotted line, mark y equals to 1. 1. Okay, I will draw a horizontal line, dotted horizontal line, to mark this as the axis of the graph. Okay. Then now, I look at my maximum and minimum y value. I see that your maximum and minimum y value is negative 2 and 4. Okay, so therefore I'll mark on my graph clearly. I will mark a point, let's say I call this point here 4. Make sure it's symmetrical by your ruler. This point here will be negative 2. Okay, I can draw a dotted line as well, so that is very clear. This dotted line represents the maximum value of the graph, and the negative 2 here represents the minimum value of the graph. Okay. Then now, once I do that, I can now draw my x-axis, which will be at the point whereby your y value is 0. So it will be somewhere about here. Okay. This is now my x-axis. Okay, this is 0, my origin. Okay. Then now the graph is from 0 to 180 degrees. So I have to draw one cycle, which means that over here, I just need to split this into 4 parts to form one cycle so that it's clear. So maybe if I were to mark this point let's say here lah, I mark this point one cycle, one quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, and fourth quadrant. Okay, so this is 180 degree. Okay, therefore now I'll split my this 180 degrees into 4 parts, which is 90 degree, 45 degree, and 135 degree. Okay, then now recall the shape of your sine graph. This is the graph of y equals to sine negative 3 sine 2x. So that means I start from 0, I go downwards towards my minimum point first. So now I'll mark out. Okay, remember the important parts of your sine graph. Sine graph here cuts at these points. Okay, from 0, it will go towards, it starts from your axis here. Remember, it doesn't start from 0 because my axis here is y equals 1. So I'll start my graph from this axis line here. Then your graph will go downwards towards the minimum point. Then it will go back upwards. And halfway mark of the cycle, it will touch y value 1 when it is 90 degree. Remember this very clearly because it doesn't touch at this point here, it touches at this point over here. Because this is your axis of the graph, your graph starts from this value of y equals to 1. Okay, so I'll mark my markings over here. When it is 45 degree is your minimum value. 90 degree, half a cycle, you'll go back to the axis. 135 degree, you go to the maximum value, which is here. And then the last one, 180 degrees, it will go back down to here. Okay. Once I've gotten these important points now, I can now use my pencil to sketch very nicely. Make sure your curve is smooth. A graph that connects these points together. So now I'll sketch my graph from here. So I'll do my best to sketch this. Okay. Okay, then I'll sketch from here, go upwards, and then go back down like this. Okay, with that I have drawn my negative sine graph. Last step is to label y equals to negative 3 sine 2x plus 1. Okay, and with that we have completed the sketch of this Trigo function. Okay, so not difficult one. Just take note that you must be clear on where the axis is, because a common mistake of students is to always think that the graph must touch at 90 degree must be 0. It is not true. It depends on the axis of the graph. Okay, this is for sine. Cosine is also similar, so I won't go through that. The last thing I'll go through is how to sketch your tangent graph. So if you still remember tangent graph, let's say look at this example here. Y equals to negative tangent 2x. Okay, shape of this graph, negative tangent graph, it means it will look like this. Remember positive tangent graph, maybe I'll draw the sides working. Positive tangent graph, it starts from 0. Okay, then go back down, go to maximum, then go down, start from negative infinity down to 0. So that means in this case here, the shape, negative means I flip, it will look like this. Okay, maybe I can draw the axis to help me visualize better. Okay, asymptote, it will look like this. Okay, next step, period. How to find period of tangent graph? You still remember? It is 180 degrees divided by b. In this case, my b is 2. So this is 90 degree. Okay, axis, there is no number. Before I do that, when I calculate a period already and I know the range here, I can now state how many cycles of tangent graph do I need to draw. If one cycle is 90 degree, I need to draw up to 180 degrees. It means that this is 2 cycles. Okay, next one, axis. There is no number added to my Trigo function, so axis is simply y equals to 0. Your x-axis will be your starting point. Okay, then maximum, a minimum y value is not, it doesn't apply to sine, cosine, to tangent functions. In this case, it will be your asymptote. Asymptotes. Okay, asymptotes over here will be 90 degree divided by b, which is 270 degrees. 270 degrees divided by 2. Okay, then we check 45 degree and 135 degree. This all falls within the range of 0 and 180 degree. Okay, any further you'll go out of the range already, so I don't need to calculate anymore. Okay, So last step. Now I can now simply draw my tangent graph. Okay, so I will draw my axis first. X-axis here. Okay. My axis is my middle point, so I can straight away draw the x-axis because the axis is y equals 0. So your graph starts from this x-axis here. Okay. Then now I check the range 0 to 180 degree. I mark out, let's say over here, I mark out count how many boxes, 6. Okay, I call this 180 degree. Okay, then therefore middle part will be 90 degree. Okay, I can split this 90 degree because I know my asymptotes must be at 45 and 135. So I'll draw 45 degree and 135 degree. Then next step is to simply use my vertical lines for the asymptote. Make sure asymptotes are drawn in dotted lines. Okay, it must be dotted. Okay, straight line represents a graph which is not valid here. So I must make sure this is a dotted line. Okay, then from here, I remember the shape again. Shape looks like this, start from 0, go downwards. So therefore, the shape of this graph is simply from here, go downwards. Then after that, start from the top, maximum infinity, all the way down to 0. Then now the cycle repeat again. Now go all the way down here, and then start from the top, go all the way to 0. Okay, and with that, we have sketched your tangent graph. Our last step is to label y equals to negative tangent 2x. And we are done with this. Okay, so I hope that this video has helped you to do a quick revision of how do you sketch your Trigo functions. Remember, sketch means all your axis intersects must show very clearly, and important points, intersection points must be shown. So always write out these workings at the side to help you visualize how you can sketch your graph before you do it, so that you don't waste time erasing and redrawing again. Okay, and that will be the end of this video.